The email arrived like any other, neat, impersonal, and deceptively simple. Subject: Guest appearance invitation from Fox News Media Relations. Host: The Ingraham Angle. Date: Friday 7:30 p.m. Format: live. Women in Power segment. Karoline Leavitt tilted her head as she reread the message. No emojis, no exclamation marks, just a cold line at the bottom. Host reserves the right to structure segment flow at discretion. It wasn't her first time on FOX News. In fact, she'd built part of her brand in those studios, but this time felt different. The phrasing, the topic, the host, Laura Ingraham. Laura had never been openly hostile, but never fully warm either. There was a tension beneath their smiles, the subtle weight of two women occupying the same ideological battlefield. Emma, Karoline's ever-present advisor, leaned over her shoulder. "You're thinking it's a setup." Karoline didn't blink. "I'm thinking it's not just a panel on power, it's a test." For the past few months, Karoline had been riding a new wave. Viral speeches, thunderous town halls, and now murmurs in Washington that she might be more than just a press secretary. She might be a candidate. That made her an asset and a threat, especially to someone like Laura, who'd built her career gatekeeping conservative media spaces. Emma exhaled. "You don't have to go. We can decline with scheduling conflict." Karoline shook her head. "I'm not stepping back now, not when they're already watching." Friday arrived with a cold wind and a sharper instinct. The Fox studio glistened with polish and tension. Karoline's car pulled into the private lot. No crowds, no staff escort. Just a quiet intern with a badge and a clipboard. Inside, something felt off. The green room wasn't hers. A production assistant redirected her to a small dressing area near the far end of the hall, near the guest bathroom. No mirror, no water, just a folded chair and an on-air light flickering behind a slightly ajar studio door. Emma texted from the hallway, "They didn't prep your mic. I'll handle it. Sit tight." Karoline tapped her heel, eyes narrowing. The segment was about to go live in 8 minutes, and there had been no makeup touch-up, no sound check, no stage greeting. Only then did the plan begin to take shape in her mind. Delay her. Disorient her. Make her late. Then shame her for it. Or better, catch her in a panicked state live on camera. She stood, brushed off her blazer, and whispered to herself, "They really think I'll fall for a studio bathroom trick?" She opened the door, into the trap she already saw coming. Karoline stepped out of the cramped holding room and into the sterile hallway, her heels striking the linoleum with calm, deliberate rhythm. The walls, lined with soundproofing foam and studio lighting cables, vibrated faintly with the distant hum of on-air segments. Somewhere ahead, Laura Ingraham's voice echoed. Smooth, composed, rehearsed. She followed the sound, turning the corner toward stage 3. A junior producer, eyes wide with panic, rushed past her, clutching a tangled XLR cable and muttering, "She's not mic'd yet. Ingraham's already teasing her entrance." Karoline didn't flinch. She knew the tactic. Laura was live, already prepping the audience, perhaps even hinting at Karoline's delay or unavailability. Paint her as late. Paint her as unprofessional. Undermine her before she even speaks. Tonight, we're joined by one of the youngest faces in conservative politics, a lightning rod for Gen Z. But is she ready for prime time? We'll find out in just a moment. That last line sliced like glass. Karoline turned to Emma, who had just caught up, and handed her a compact mic pack. They bypassed pre-segment coordination. No water, no mirror, no prep, and they've changed the camera setup. Emma's jaw tightened. What does that mean? Karoline clipped the mic onto her lapel. It means they're planning a tight 2-shot. One camera, no escape. The assistant producer waved frantically from behind the curtain. "We're live in 30 seconds. Ms. Leavitt, on stage, now." Karoline stepped through the curtain and into the lights. The studio wasn't as large as it looked on television, but it was perfectly calibrated for control. 2 armchairs sat across from each other under a halo of white-blue light. Behind them, a massive screen scrolled through images of Karoline at rallies, overlaid with the segment title, Disruption or Direction? Gen Z's Role in the GOP. Laura sat poised in her chair, legs crossed, lips curled into a half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She gestured politely, but it felt like a trap door opening. "Karoline, glad you could join us," Laura said with practiced warmth. "We were just wondering if your new fame made punctuality optional." Karoline smiled tightly, adjusting her mic and sitting down. "Not at all. I came as soon as I realized the green room didn't exist." A few quiet chuckles from the crew. Laura blinked, just once, then smiled wider. "Well, let's dive in. You've been called Trump's Gen Z firestarter. Some love you. Others think you're reckless. What makes you think you're ready to carry the conservative mantle?" Karoline didn't answer immediately. Instead, she leaned slightly forward, eyes locked on Laura's with a smile that disarmed and dared. "Is this the part where you ask the real question, or are we still warming up the audience?" Laura's smile stiffened. For the first time, the angle behind the curtain faltered. Karoline had entered the lion's den, but she hadn't come to survive. She'd come to take the mic and rewrite the script. Laura Ingraham blinked just once, but the flicker was enough. The studio lights burned hot above them, yet the temperature in the room dropped. Karoline's question, more challenge than inquiry, had landed harder than expected. The camera didn't miss Laura's slight exhale, nor did the audience miss the shift in her tone. Laura recovered quickly. "It's refreshing to see confidence," she said, tilting her head. "But let's talk substance. The GOP's elders worry you're too, let's say, fast-moving. Too brash. Trump may like fire, but the party needs discipline. What do you say to that?" Karoline crossed one leg over the other, her posture regal but relaxed. "Discipline without direction is paralysis. If we wait for permission to speak just to avoid discomfort, we'll lose the people we claim to fight for." Laura nodded slowly, clearly rehearsed for this kind of answer. "But disruption for disruption's sake? That's not leadership. That's rebellion." The word hung in the air. Rebellion. It wasn't a mistake. It was bait. Karoline knew it. This wasn't just about questioning her youth or her loyalty. Laura was trying to frame her as unstable, rogue, a threat to the Republican hierarchy, not a renewal of it. And that was the real reason for the trap. But Karoline didn't bite. She smiled. "I don't need to rebel," she said, her voice clear. "The people already did. That's why they sent Trump. That's why they're listening to me now." The production crew glanced at one another. Even in their soundproof headsets, they could feel it. Karoline wasn't just answering. She was redirecting. Owning. Laura leaned in now, her tone cooling. "You've become a media darling lately. Trending hashtags, viral clips. But let's talk about something less viral. Your time management." Karoline arched an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Laura motioned to the offstage screen. "Roll it." Behind them, a security camera feed began playing. Grainy black and white footage from the Fox hallway showed Karoline walking toward the dressing area, pausing near the guest bathroom. The voiceover, pre-recorded, was Laura's. When offered her green room, our guest chose a break instead, 5 minutes before airtime. A smug silence settled in. Karoline stared at the screen. Then she turned, slowly, back to Laura. The live audience tensed. The trap had been sprung. Laura had just accused her of prioritizing a bathroom visit over professionalism, and now the cameras were locked on Karoline's face, waiting for a stammer, an apology, a fall. But Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she looked directly into camera one, calm as stone, and she said, "When systems are designed to disorient you, the smartest thing you can do is pause, then walk in ready." Silence. Not just on stage, but behind the camera, in the control booth, across every whispering producer's headset. Laura opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came. Karoline smiled faintly. "Your tape proves I knew exactly what you were trying to do." The trap hadn't snapped shut on Karoline. It had collapsed in Laura's hands. The control room at FOX buzzed with confused tension. Producers stared at each other over blinking monitors, mouths half open, fingers frozen over the console. One turned to another and whispered, "Did she just flip the ambush?" Back in the studio, Laura Ingraham reset her posture, recrossed her legs, and leaned in just enough to reclaim the screen. But the balance of power had shifted. She could feel it. So could the crew. So could the viewers. Karoline Leavitt hadn't cracked under the footage. She turned it into proof that she was one step ahead. Laura tried to pivot. "Well, Karoline, not everyone sees hallway footage as strategy. Some just saw hesitation. Are you saying every misstep is calculated now?" Karoline didn't hesitate. "No, I'm saying some missteps are staged by people hoping I'd stumble." Gasps from the audience. One of the cameramen coughed to hide a chuckle. The control booth lit up with internal messages like, "We're losing narrative. Pulled a commercial?" But Laura ignored her earpiece. She went in for the next strike. "Let's not forget, this is FOX News. This network helped build the very platform you stand on. Yet some say your rise is more social media than substance. So tell me, what do you stand for?" "Really?" Karoline adjusted her mic, sat forward, and this time spoke without an ounce of tension in her jaw. "I stand for voters who don't own studio lights. I stand for conservative women tired of being told when they're too bold or too loud. I stand for the 19-year-old intern who was told to fetch coffee instead of write policy. And I stand for truth, unfiltered and sometimes uncomfortable." The audience was silent. Not out of shock this time, but awe. Karoline didn't sound like a guest anymore. She sounded like the one asking questions. Laura's eyes flicked to the offstage timer. She still had 4 minutes left, but she was running out of ground. She tried again. "You sound prepared, but are you loyal?" The word dropped like a pin in a marble hall. Karoline tilted her head. "To whom?" Laura smiled faintly. "To the movement that made you. Trump, MAGA, the conservative base." Karoline's answer came faster than anyone expected. "I'm loyal to the truth. I support President Trump because he fights for Americans who've been ignored. But if anyone starts playing the same old DC games, I'll say it. That includes people on this stage." There it was, a quiet earthquake. The camera operator, a 20-year veteran, whispered into his mic, "This girl's not playing checkers. She's rewriting the whole board." Laura blinked again. Her next line was written on the prompter, but she didn't read it. Karoline had taken control, and even in Laura's own studio, on her own segment, there was no denying it. The show no longer belonged to the host. The segment ended with a quiet thud, not the triumphant tone Fox producers had imagined. There was no signature sign-off from Laura, no smiling, "Thanks for joining us." Just an abrupt cut to commercial as the screen faded to black. Inside the studio, silence lingered for a beat too long. Laura stood stiffly, smoothing her papers without looking up. Karoline rose slowly, unclipping her mic with ease, her expression calm, not smug, not shaken, just still. An intern tried to escort her off set, but Karoline didn't move. She turned to Laura, looked her in the eye, and said, "Next time you try to trap someone, check if they know the rules better than you." And then she left. Outside the Fox building, the night air was cool, but Karoline felt electric. Emma met her by the black SUV, phone in hand, face flushed with adrenaline. "You need to see this," she said breathlessly. Karoline stepped into the car. Emma handed her the phone. Karoline Strikes Back was trending #1 on X. Clips from the segment were already flooding the platform. One post showed Karoline saying, "When systems are designed to disorient you, the smartest thing you can do is pause, then walk in ready." It had over 4 million views in 20 minutes. Another post from a conservative influencer read, "She walked into a trap and made it a TED Talk. Karoline Leavitt is the future." Full Stop, Fox's own subreddit, was split down the middle. Some loyal to Laura were stunned. Others were praising Karoline's composure as a masterclass in political judo. Emma scrolled rapidly. "This is exploding faster than Dyro." Karoline raised an eyebrow. "You think?" Emma turned the screen again. A headline from a major blog flashed, Karoline outmaneuvers Laura Ingraham. Is Gen Z's GOP already here? Karoline leaned back in the seat, processing it all. She hadn't planned to dominate the night. She came to survive, maybe win a moment or two. But what happened in there wasn't a win. It was a shift. She'd faced off against a titan of conservative media, and not only walked away intact, but walked out as the story. Back in the Fox studio, Laura sat in silence, staring at her own reflection in the blackened monitor. A producer stepped in, voice hesitant. "Ma'am, do you want to retape the segment for syndication?" Laura waved him off. The words still echoed in her ears. "Next time you try to trap someone, check if they know the rules better than you." Karoline's SUV turned onto 8th Avenue and Emma looked over. "You know what this means, right?" Karoline gave a faint smile. "It means they're going to come harder next time." Emma nodded. "You ready?" Karoline looked out the window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. Always. By the time Karoline returned home, the night had already reshaped itself into a media storm. The one-line knockout moment, her calm, defiant look into the camera followed by, "When systems are designed to disorient you," was clipped, remixed, subtitled, and posted by every major political page within 2 hours. Edits placed her quote over cinematic music. Others spliced it next to Reagan or Trump quotes, calling her the voice of a new right. But the real shift came when Trump reposted the clip. His Truth Social headline read, "Karoline handled Laura like a total pro. Smart, calm, strong, very proud." The capital letters said it all. Karoline wasn't just a press secretary anymore. She was a contender. The next morning, at a conservative think tank breakfast in Arlington, her name came up 3 times before the coffee was even served. A senator leaned over to a donor and muttered, "I thought Laura would corner her." Turns out she gave Karoline a stage. At the White House press office, aides rewatched the clip while sipping espresso, whispering in corridors. One leaned into a colleague. "She just did more in one segment than most of us do in 6 press releases." Even CNN ran a segment. Did Laura Ingraham just get outplayed by Gen Z? And the answer, spoken or not, was becoming clear. Karoline, meanwhile, sat in a modest meeting room, phone on silent, laptop open, reading a string of internal emails. One from her former campaign strategist stood out. "This is your Sarah Palin moment, except smarter, tougher, and with less lipstick. Want to talk next moves?" She sipped her tea, unfazed. Emma burst in, breathless again. "You're not going to believe who just texted me. Mitch's team. They want to set up a coffee." Karoline raised an eyebrow. "Mitch McConnell?" Emma nodded. "Or at least his chief of staff. They're intrigued." Karoline leaned back. That word, intrigued, it wasn't affection, it was attention. The kind you get right before the game changes. Meanwhile, at Fox headquarters, Laura Ingraham wasn't answering calls. Her producer team, some shaken, some embarrassed, drafted new segment strategies. Ratings had gone up, but the internal memo was clear. Next time, vet your guests harder. But how do you vet someone who wrote the playbook mid-air and landed it standing? Karoline's phone vibrated again. This time, it was a text from her mother. "Saw you on TV. You reminded me of when you stood up to that teacher in 10th grade. Except now it's millions of people watching." Karoline smiled softly. All she had done was show up, refuse to flinch, and answer a loaded camera with a measured truth. But sometimes, that's all it takes to shake a room. And then a country. Within 48 hours of the Fox segment, Karoline's name had entered circles it had only hovered around before. Some Republican strategists were impressed, others were worried. "She humiliated Laura," one senior advisor whispered at a Senate lunch. "If she can do that to a veteran anchor, imagine what she'll do to us." In private group chats and donor dinners, a new phrase began surfacing. Too much heat, too soon. Karoline noticed the subtle shift. Invitations from think tanks became postponed. A senator's office that once tweeted her quotes now stayed silent. But she didn't panic. She understood how the game was played. First, they cheer you, then, they test you. And if you pass, they try to contain you. Emma brought the latest headline from Politico. MAGA's next star? Or a threat to GOP order? Karoline smirked. Can I be both? That night, she took the stage at a fundraiser in New Hampshire. It was a small room, maybe 300 people, but the energy was nuclear. She didn't mention Laura. She didn't need to. She just said one line. No matter who tries to dim the light, if it's real, it shines anyway. The crowd erupted. Back at Fox, Laura watched the clip from her private office. She sat still, no makeup, no audience, just her and the screen. A producer knocked. You want to respond on air? Laura shook her head. Number she won this round. But her eyes narrowed. Because in politics, there's always a next round. Karoline didn't seek the spotlight, yet now it followed her everywhere. At the airport, strangers asked for selfies. On campus visits, students wore shirts with her Fox, quote, pause, then walk in ready. Even liberal-leaning outlets couldn't ignore her. A New York Times columnist reluctantly admitted, Leavitt's composure was something we rarely see, even from veteran politicians. But admiration wasn't the only thing rising. Critics sharpened their knives. A former RNC consultant tweeted, Karoline Leavitt is dangerous. She doesn't wait her turn, and people like that always break the party. On a Sunday panel, a commentator scoffed, she thinks being young gives her a pass, but she's just media hype. Karoline watched it all with one eye on the screen, the other on strategy. Emma said, they're scared because you didn't flinch, because you knew what to say and when to stop talking. Karoline answered simply, no. They're scared because I didn't ask permission. That week, Trump's senior advisor called. He wants you at Mar-a-Lago, closed round table, no press. Karoline nodded. She knew what that meant. She was no longer just the story. She was becoming part of the strategy. The table at Mar-a-Lago wasn't large, but the power around it was massive. Karoline walked in calmly. Waiting for her were Trump's senior advisor, 2 campaign strategists, and one of the top legal voices in the movement. They didn't speak right away. They just watched. Trump wasn't there yet. His advisor stood. Karoline, you've shaken the narrative. That Fox moment, people are still quoting it. She gave a short nod. I didn't do it to trend. I did it to show I'm not a puppet. One of the strategists leaned in. That's why we're here. You've got lightning in a bottle, but it's time to talk discipline, messaging, control. Karoline tilted her head. Control? The room paused. Trump entered, holding a Diet Coke, and smiled. You broke Fox. I love it. Everyone laughed, but Karoline stayed focused. Trump sat and leaned forward. They're gonna come harder now. From the media, from the Hill, even from inside. You ready for that? Karoline didn't blink. I've been ready since the day they told me I wasn't. Trump grinned. Good answer. But then the legal advisor cut in. We need to prepare. Some are saying you humiliated Laura too personally. It could alienate key donors. Karoline leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. If donors want silence over strength, they're funding the wrong movement. Trump raised his eyebrows. A moment of silence followed. Then he chuckled. I like her more every time she talks. The strategist shifted uncomfortably. Still, we need alignment. If you're going to speak that boldly, maybe it's time we define what's next. Karoline sat back. I'm not here to define the next step. I am the next step. The room went quiet again, but this time with a different kind of silence. Not disapproval, recognition. 3 days later, Karoline stood backstage at a conservative youth summit in Tampa. Over 6,000 young attendees filled the arena, waving flags and holding homemade signs that read, Pause, then walk in ready. Not a puppet, a problem. Karoline 2020. She adjusted the mic on her blazer, glanced at Emma, and smiled. Feels bigger than a press conference. Emma nodded. That Fox line, it became something else. A slogan. A signal. When Karoline stepped on stage, the crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. The roar was deafening. She didn't wave for silence, she just started talking, and the room followed. "I didn't ask to go viral," she began. "I asked for a fair shot to speak." She paused, letting the moment breathe. "They gave me a trap. I turned it into a platform." Applause exploded. "I didn't come here to be another safe voice. I came to fight for a generation that's told to wait their turn. I didn't wait. And neither should you." As the cheers grew louder, Karoline's gaze swept the crowd. She had survived the ambush. She had silenced a veteran on her home turf. But more than that, she had created something new. She was no longer just Trump's Gen Z spokeswoman. She was a voice that no one could ignore. In a quiet Fox studio days later, a producer rewatched the infamous clip. Laura Ingraham, now back on air but more measured, hadn't spoken about it since. But behind closed doors, she had said one sentence to her team: "We thought we were testing her. Turns out, we were making her." Karoline Leavitt faced the camera with one sentence, and in doing so, rewrote her place, not just in media, but in the future of American politics. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room doesn't come from the veteran anchor. It comes from the one they tried to silence. Karoline Leavitt didn't just survive a trap on live TV. She turned it into a turning point. With one sentence, she reminded millions that strength isn't about age, permission, or playing it safe. It's about knowing who you are and never backing down, even when the lights are brightest. Because real leadership doesn't wait for the mic. It becomes the mic. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe for more powerful moments from today's most fearless voices.